We transferred your $3 million trust to your brother. He earned it, Mom declared. Now they're sitting in my lobby, begging to meet Ms. Andrea, the elusive CEO purchasing their company. If only they realized the truth. Can you imagine being told by your own parents, at a family dinner, that they'd just given away the $3 million inheritance meant for you? And not just to anyone, but to your brother, Max, with them casually adding, he deserves it more than you do right now. It was like a gut punch, a betrayal so profound it changed the entire course of my life. Slight pause, a knowing, almost smirk. Well, fast forward 3 years. Today, those same parents, and Max, are sitting in my lobby, anxiously waiting to meet the mysterious CEO of Phoenix Holdings, the company that's about to acquire their failing family business. They have absolutely no idea it's me. Quick cut to a confident, direct look, leaning slightly into the camera. If that doesn't make you wonder what the hell happened next, I don't know what will. This isn't just a story about revenge, it's about what happens when you're forced to build everything from scratch, stronger than ever before. So, grab a drink, get comfortable, because I'm about to take you back to where this wild journey truly began. Growing up as a Westbrook meant something in our community. My dad, Richard, was a legend. He built Westbrook Manufacturing from nothing into this regional powerhouse, supplying precision parts to all these big automotive companies. Our home, this sprawling colonial in one of Connecticut's most exclusive neighborhoods, was basically a monument to his success. My mom, Eleanor, always immaculately dressed, always perfectly social, she curated our family image with the same meticulous detail my dad put into his factory. But beneath that shiny veneer, I always knew my place. I was the one who brought home perfect report cards, won every academic competition, showed a natural knack for math and business strategy, and my achievements? They were met with brief, almost dismissive nods. "That's what we expect from you, Andrea," my father would grunt, barely looking up from his newspaper. Max, my brother, 2 years younger, lived by a totally different rulebook. His C grades were celebrated as trying his best. His endless string of abandoned hobbies, a guitar gathering dust after 3 lessons, half-finished model airplanes, sports equipment from teams he quit within weeks, those were all seen as him exploring his interests. When he wrecked his first car, a brand new convertible, just 3 weeks after getting his license, my parents bought him another one, no questions asked. "Accidents happen, he needs to learn," they'd say. The contrast was so stark, so infuriating, but subtle enough that if I ever dared complain, I'd just be labeled jealous or petty. So, I swallowed my frustration and poured every ounce of it into being excellent, hoping, somehow, they would eventually see my worth. There was one person who saw it, though, my maternal grandmother, Vivian. She was truly different. A sharp, brilliant businesswoman who had helped my grandfather build their own successful company decades earlier. She recognized something in me that my parents seemed utterly blind to. During summer visits to her lakeside home, she'd teach me about investments, market trends, strategic thinking, things that lit a fire in me. "You have the mind of a true businesswoman, Andrea," she'd tell me. "Not everyone will see it, but don't let that stop you from becoming who you're meant to be." When I turned 16, Vivian did something extraordinary. She established a trust fund in my name, $3 million. I wouldn't be able to touch it until I turned 30, except for educational expenses and business investments she personally approved. "This is for your future," she said, her eyes twinkling. "I've seen how your mind works, and I want to make sure you have the resources to make your mark on the world." Our family lawyer, Franklin Pierce, an old friend of my grandmother's, was the trustee. Her intentions couldn't have been clearer. My parents? They seemed completely unbothered at the time. They had plenty of their own money, and everyone just assumed Max would inherit the family business anyway. I excelled, of course. Graduated valedictorian, got into an Ivy League business school on a partial scholarship. But even with all those academic achievements, family gatherings remained these strange exercises in invisibility. All conversations revolved around Maxwell's latest fleeting interest or my father's business expansions. Mom would sometimes ask about my little finance projects, but her eyes would glaze over the second I tried to explain concepts like market arbitrage or venture capital. After graduating with honors, I landed a position at a prestigious investment firm in Manhattan. I rented a modest apartment, even though my parents offered to buy me one. "It's not like we can't afford it, Andrea," they'd say. But I was determined to build my life on my own terms. My early career was a brutal grind, 14-hour workdays, cancelled vacations, a relentless drive to prove myself. Meanwhile, Maxwell dropped out of 3 different colleges before my father finally brought him into Westbrook Manufacturing at 24. He was immediately given a vice president title, despite having 0 relevant experience or qualifications. While I was building complex financial models late into the night, Maxwell was posting Instagram photos from business trips that looked suspiciously like lavish vacations. His first independent venture, a high-end bar, imploded within 6 months. His second, importing luxury watches, collapsed because he couldn't manage inventory. Each and every failure was softened by my parents' endless financial support and their unwavering encouragement to keep trying. The pattern became painfully predictable. Max would start something, lose interest or mismanage it, and my parents would sweep in, cover the losses, and then praise his entrepreneurial spirit. It was infuriating. During this time, I maintained a cordial but increasingly distant relationship with my family. Holiday visits got shorter, phone calls felt more like an obligation. I was building my own path, and it diverged further from the Westbrook family narrative with every passing year. By the time I was 29, I had climbed the ranks to senior management at my firm, building a solid reputation for spotting undervalued opportunities. I stayed in regular contact with Franklin Pierce about my trust fund, discussing my plans for it once it became accessible. I had a meticulously detailed business plan for my own investment firm, focusing on revitalizing struggling but fundamentally sound companies. The trust was set to transfer to my control in just a few months, on my 30th birthday. Everything was proceeding exactly according to plan, until that fateful dinner that would shatter everything. The invitation to dinner at my parents' home came with this unusual insistence. "We need to discuss something important as a family," my mother said, her voice carrying that distinct tone that simply brooked no argument. I'd been planning to spend that entire weekend finalizing my business proposal, the culmination of years of work, ready to launch my independent career using my trust fund. But I reluctantly agreed to go. The Westbrook family estate looked exactly the same as always when I pulled into the circular driveway that spring evening. The manicured landscaping, the imposing facade, the warm glow of the lights, all of it suggesting a welcoming family home. A perfect exterior, masking the utterly dysfunctional dynamics within. Maxwell's Porsche was already parked near the entrance. Of course, he'd arrived before me, I thought dryly. He lived only 15 minutes away in the downtown condo our parents had purchased for him after his second business failure. He claimed it was to be closer to the office, though his sporadic appearances at Westbrook Manufacturing hardly justified the prime real estate. My mother greeted me with her customary air kiss, making a pointed comment about my practical pantsuit as if it were some quaint eccentricity rather than standard attire for a finance professional. My father offered a brief, stiff hug before retreating to pour drinks in the living room. Maxwell was lounging on the sofa, scrolling through his phone, barely acknowledging my arrival. Dinner itself was the usual polite small talk. My father droned on about contract negotiations, my mother detailed plans for her garden charity event, and Maxwell talked at length about his newest brilliant business idea, an exclusive, members-only club that would revolutionize networking. I tried to offer insights about market trends affecting industries like my father's, which received polite nods before the conversation inevitably circled back to Maxwell's grand plans. It wasn't until dessert was served that my mother cleared her throat and exchanged a loaded glance with my father. "Andrea, we've made an important family decision that affects you," she began, her voice just a little too calm. Something in her tone made me set down my fork. "As you know, Maxwell has had some challenges with his ventures, despite his tremendous potential," she continued. "And he's recently come to us with an excellent business proposal that could truly establish him independently." My father nodded vigorously. "Our son has real vision this time. Just needs proper capital to make it work. I glanced at Maxwell, who was suddenly studying his dessert with an almost comical intensity. The thing is, my mother said, her voice carefully modulated, Maxwell needs significant startup capital, and with the current banking climate, taking on additional debt isn't prudent for the family. A cold sensation, a truly terrible premonition, began spreading through my chest. I suddenly knew exactly where this was heading. We gave your $3 million trust to your brother, Maxwell, my mother announced, taking a casual sip of wine. He deserves it more than you do right now. The words hung in the air, impossible and yet undeniably real. My mind reeled. You what? My voice sounded strange, thin, to my own ears. Now, Andrea, my father interjected, trying to sound reasonable. We know you're doing well in your career. You've always been self-sufficient. Maxwell has a family to think about now. He was referring to Max's girlfriend of 6 months and her daughter from a previous relationship. And his business plan is solid. This is about family supporting family. Voice rising slightly in disbelief, trembling with suppressed anger. That trust was established by grandmother specifically for me, I said, struggling to keep my voice steady, to even process what I was hearing. It was for my education and my business ventures. It wasn't yours to give away. Franklin Pierce agreed to the transfer, my mother countered dismissively. It's all been handled legally. Franklin agreed? How did you convince him to go against grandmother's explicit wishes? I demanded, my breath catching in my throat. My father waved his hand impatiently. Pierce understood this was a family decision. Your grandmother would have wanted what's best for all of us. Don't you dare bring grandmother into this, I said, my voice hardening, laced with pure fury. She established that trust because she believed in me and my potential. She would never have approved of this. Maxwell, the architect of this whole scheme, finally spoke up, his tone dripping with fake sympathy. Look, sis, I know this seems unfair, but I really need this chance. You're already successful. You have your fancy job and your apartment in the city. I'm trying to build something from scratch. Short, sharp laugh of incredulity. From scratch? I echoed, absolutely stunned. You've had every advantage handed to you your entire life, and now you're taking the one thing that was specifically meant for me. Andrea, you're being dramatic, my mother sighed, as if I was the problem. This isn't about taking anything from you. It's about allocating family resources where they're most needed. Family resources? I stood up, unable to remain seated for another second. The blood was pounding in my ears. That was my trust fund. Meaning, not family resources to be reallocated at your convenience. My father's expression hardened. The decision is made, Andrea. The paperwork is signed. The funds have already been transferred to Maxwell's business account. Already transferred? The words hit me like a physical blow. You did this behind my back and only told me after it was done. We knew you'd react this way, my mother said, looking almost smug. You've always been overly attached to your independence. This isn't healthy, Andrea. The conversation devolved from there into a chaotic mess. My logical arguments about legality and my grandmother's intentions were met with endless emotional appeals about family support and Maxwell's needs. When I pressed about how Franklin Pierce could possibly have allowed this, my father finally admitted they had leveraged his firm's long-standing business relationship with Westbrook Manufacturing to pressure him into cooperating. This is wrong, I said finally, my voice low but vibrating with conviction, as I gathered my purse. Not just legally, but morally. You've betrayed not only me, but grandmother's memory and wishes. Don't be so self-righteous, Maxwell snapped, his faint sympathy finally cracking. His true colors showed. You've always thought you were better than me. Maybe this will teach you some humility. Look of stark realization, a complete shift in demeanor. I looked at him, then at my parents, and in that moment, I saw with perfect clarity the twisted dynamic that had shaped our family for decades. "No, Maxwell," I said, a strange calm washing over me. "This has taught me something else entirely. That I can never count on any of you to respect me or my boundaries." "Andrea, don't leave like this," my mother called as I headed for the door, her voice tinged with a sudden panic. "You're still part of this family." I turned back, one last time. "Am I?" I asked, a bitter smile on my face. "Because families don't steal from each other. They don't dismiss each other's dreams. They don't betray each other's trust." And with that, I walked out. The drive home was a blur of hot tears and white-knuckled grip on the steering wheel. The future I had so carefully planned, so painstakingly built in my mind, had been yanked up from under me with the casual cruelty that had always characterized my family's treatment of me. Only this time, they had taken something tangible, something that was rightfully mine. But by the time I reached my apartment, the tears had dried. In their place was something else, a cold, clear, unwavering determination. If my family thought this would break me, or bring me crawling back for their approval, they were sorely mistaken. They had taught me one final, painful lesson, that I would have to build my success entirely on my own terms. And that's exactly what I intended to do. The very next morning after that disastrous dinner, I called in sick to work for the first time in my career. I immediately scheduled an emergency appointment with Victoria Chun, a fiercely competent attorney specializing in trust law. I needed to understand my options from someone completely unconnected to my family and their influence. Victoria's downtown office was a stark contrast to Franklin Pierce's wood-paneled old boys club workspace. She listened intently as I explained everything, occasionally making notes, but mostly maintaining this unwavering, intense eye contact. "Legally speaking, this is questionable at best," she said after I finished. "Your grandmother's intentions were clear in the trust documentation." She tapped her pen against her legal pad. "However, contesting this would be messy and prolonged. My parents clearly pressured the trustee, but proving undue influence would require Franklin Pierce to testify against my family's interests, which he won't do," I stated flatly. "Precisely," Victoria confirmed. "And even if we could build a case, these matters can take years to resolve, with substantial legal fees and no guarantee of success." She leaned forward, her expression serious. "Andrea, I need to ask you something. What's your primary goal here? To recover the money, or to move forward with your life?" The question caught me off guard, but only for a moment. "Both, ideally," I admitted. "But if I had to choose one immediately, I need to move forward, Victoria." "Then my advice is this," she said. "Document everything for a potential future legal action, yes, but focus your energy on building what you intended to build, just on a different scale or timeline." After consulting with Victoria, I made one final call to my parents. My mother answered immediately, launching into a rehearsed speech about family unity and forgiveness. I cut her off mid-sentence. "I'm not calling for reconciliation," I said, my voice steady, cold. "I'm calling to make one thing perfectly clear. What you've done is theft, plain and simple. I won't forget it, and I won't pretend it didn't happen." "Andrea, you're being completely unreasonable," she began, her tone rising. "No, I'm finally seeing things clearly," I replied, cutting her off again. "Don't contact me again unless you're prepared to return what rightfully belongs to me. Until then, we have nothing to discuss." I hung up before she could respond, and then, with a deep, shaky breath, I blocked their numbers. The clean break was both agonizing and incredibly liberating, like setting a broken bone so it could finally heal properly. Without my trust fund, my business plans needed a radical overhaul. Instead of launching my own firm immediately, I would need to continue working for others, saving every single penny to build my capital. The timeline I had carefully planned now stretched out indefinitely before me. The next months were a grueling test of endurance. I increased my already demanding work schedule to 80 hours a week, taking on every additional project others avoided. Sleep became a luxury, a social life a non-existent dream. Every single dollar I earned beyond basic living expenses went straight into my investment account. 6 months after the trust fund betrayal, I caught a break. A senior portfolio manager at my firm, Sofia Martinez, noticed my exceptional performance and specifically requested me for a special project. Sofia, unlike many of the firm's old guard, had built her career without family connections or inherited wealth. Perhaps she recognized something of herself in my relentless determination. "You have good instincts, Andrea," she told me after we successfully completed a challenging restructuring deal. "But more importantly, you see opportunities others miss because they're too busy following conventional wisdom." Under Sofia's mentorship, I gained access to higher-level investment strategies and connections that would have taken years to build otherwise. When she asked about my long-term goals, I shared a modified version of my original business plan. "Why wait?" she challenged, her eyes sharp. "You've identified a solid opportunity in the market. What's stopping you from pursuing it now?" "Capital," I answered simply. "My personal investment funds aren't sufficient yet." Sofia studied me thoughtfully. "There are other ways to secure initial funding. Sometimes you have to bet big on yourself before others will." Her words resonated deep within me. 2 weeks later, I identified an investment opportunity that everyone else had overlooked, a struggling tech company with a patent portfolio worth far more than the market recognized. After exhaustive analysis, I was convinced the company's stock would triple within 6 months once certain litigation was resolved. In what was either the bravest or most reckless decision of my life, I took out a personal loan against my apartment and invested every single cent I had in this one single opportunity. The 6-week waiting period that followed was absolutely excruciating. I checked stock prices obsessively, waking up at 3 a.m. to review any news from Asian markets that might affect the company's position. When the litigation settled favorably, the stock surged, exactly as I had predicted. I sold at the optimal moment, repaid my loan, and found myself with enough capital to finally make my next move. It wasn't $3 million, no, but it was enough to start. I named my new investment firm Vivian Capital, in honor of my grandmother. Starting with a tiny office and just 2 employees, myself and a brilliant analyst named James Taylor, who had been consistently overlooked at his previous firm due to his introverted nature, we began the slow, methodical work of building a reputation. My strategy was different from typical investment firms. Rather than chasing trendy startups or blue-chip stocks, I focused on identifying fundamentally sound companies that were underperforming due to fixable problems, often management issues or outdated business models. We would invest, restructure, and revitalize, creating value where others saw only decline. This approach required intensive research, deep relationship building, and a willingness to make unpopular moves. It also kept me largely behind the scenes, earning me a reputation as the reclusive Miss Andrea, who rarely appeared at industry events, but whose investment decisions were increasingly watched and respected. Each success provided capital for larger opportunities. I hired selectively, focusing on talented individuals who, like James, had been underestimated or overlooked. Rachel Williams joined as our legal counsel after being passed over for partnership at her law firm despite outperforming her male colleagues. Dominic Alvarez came aboard as operations director after a larger firm failed to recognize his innovative process improvements. By year 3, Vivian Capital had grown from a tiny startup to a respected boutique firm managing over $200 million in assets. I had moved out of my small apartment into a penthouse with breathtaking views of Central Park, not for the status, but as a daily, tangible reminder of how far I'd come through my own efforts. I maintained my policy of privacy, declining interviews and sending representatives to industry functions. Few people knew the face behind Vivian Capital's success, which suited me perfectly. I had no interest in celebrity, only in results. It was during a routine market research session that I first noticed the concerning reports about Westbrook Manufacturing. Revenue had declined for 3 consecutive quarters. Major contracts weren't being renewed. Industry analysts cited management instability and quality control issues. Further investigation revealed that my father had semi-retired 2 years earlier, turning day-to-day operations over to Maxwell. Since then, the company had lost market share steadily, while expenses, particularly executive compensation and business development costs, had increased dramatically. An anonymous employee review caught my attention. New management spends more time on golf courses than factory floors. Quality issues ignored until major clients complain. Dedicated employees being laid off while executives get bonuses. The pieces clicked into place. Maxwell had evidently burned through my trust fund with his own failed ventures and was now running our family's once respected company straight into the ground. My father, too proud to retake control, was watching his legacy crumble before his very eyes. For a moment, just a fleeting moment, I felt this raw, vindictive satisfaction. They were finally reaping what they had sown. But that feeling quickly gave way to a more complex realization. Westbrook Manufacturing employed hundreds of people who depended on those jobs. The company's decline wasn't just my family's problem. It affected an entire community. And suddenly, with a chilling clarity, I knew exactly what my next investment would be. Westbrook Manufacturing. James Taylor raised an eyebrow when I laid the company profile on the conference table. "Isn't that your family's company?" "Yes," I confirmed, addressing the executive team gathered in our sleek Manhattan office. Which is precisely why this acquisition would need to be handled differently than our usual investments. Rachel Williams, our legal counsel, was already flipping through the financial reports I'd provided. "These numbers are concerning. Revenue down 28% year-over-year. Quality complaints up 62%. Cash reserves nearly depleted." She looked up, her expression pointed. "From a purely business perspective, why would we want this?" It was a fair question. I clicked to the next slide in my presentation. Because beneath the mismanagement, the fundamentals remain strong. Westbrook has manufacturing capabilities that would take years to build from scratch. Their patent portfolio alone is worth more than their current market valuation, and their workforce includes master craftsmen with decades of specialized experience. Dominic Alvarez, always pragmatic, leaned forward. "I see the potential value, Andrea, but the family connection complicates things. If they know you're behind the offer, emotions could derail rational business negotiations." "Exactly," I agreed. "Which is why they won't know I'm involved until the deal is finalized." The plan took shape over the following days. We would create a shell company, Phoenix Holdings, to approach Westbrook Manufacturing with an acquisition offer. All communications would go through intermediaries, with my name kept completely out of the process. James would lead the financial due diligence, while Rachel ensured our legal position was unassailable. The deeper we dug into Westbrook's situation, the worse it appeared. Maxwell had instituted a management style that could generously be described as absentee. He had hired several college friends for executive positions despite their glaring lack of qualifications. Expenses for client entertainment had tripled, while investment in equipment maintenance had been slashed. Most concerning were the reports from the factory workers. Layoffs had increased workloads for remaining employees. Safety concerns were being ignored. Maxwell rarely even visited the production floor, and when he did, he arrived late, left early, and dismissed any concerns raised by veteran employees. Meanwhile, social media told its own sickening story. While the company struggled, Maxwell's Instagram showed exotic vacations, a brand new yacht, and celebrity parties, all presumably financed by his generous compensation package and whatever remained of my trust fund. Our initial acquisition offer was deliberately conservative, enough to be taken seriously, but low enough to establish our negotiating position. The response came quickly, a counteroffer so ridiculously high it suggested desperation rather than confidence. "They need this deal more than they're admitting," James observed after reviewing their proposal, "but they're trying to maintain leverage they don't actually have." The negotiations proceeded through layers of lawyers and investment bankers. Each round revealed more about Westbrook's increasingly precarious position. They were potentially facing default on a major loan within 60 days. A key client was threatening to cancel their contract due to chronic quality issues. Employee pension obligations were significantly underfunded. As we applied strategic pressure, I found myself questioning my motivations. Was I pursuing this acquisition for sound business reasons, or was it, at its core, about revenge? The question troubled me enough that I raised it with Rachel during a late-night strategy session. "Does it matter?" she asked bluntly, not even looking up from a legal brief. "The business case is solid. The acquisition makes financial sense. Whether you also get personal satisfaction seems irrelevant to the decision." "It matters to me," I insisted. "I don't want to become the kind of person who uses business as a weapon." Rachel considered this, twirling her pen thoughtfully. "Andrea, I've worked with plenty of executives who make decisions based purely on ego or vendettas. That's not what you're doing here. You identified a distressed asset with unrealized value. The fact that you have personal knowledge that helps you see that value more clearly than others just gives us an edge." Her perspective helped, but I still spent a sleepless night weighing the complex emotions involved in buying my family's company. By morning, I had reached clarity. I would proceed with the acquisition because it made business sense. But I would structure the deal to protect the employees and preserve what was valuable about Westbrook Manufacturing. The final phase of negotiations was incredibly tense. Westbrook's representatives pushed relentlessly for meetings with Miss Andrea, the mysterious CEO behind Phoenix Holdings. I declined repeatedly, insisting that all communications continue through our respective teams until terms were finalized. Behind the scenes, I prepared meticulously for the eventual revelation. I reviewed restructuring plans with James, ensuring they were both profitable and ethical. I worked with Dominic on communication strategies for the Westbrook employees. I even rehearsed what I would say to my family when the moment came. As we approached the final agreement, rumors spread through industry channels about the reclusive investor who was acquiring Westbrook Manufacturing. My parents' lawyer made increasingly urgent requests for a face-to-face meeting before signing. "They're trying to identify you," Rachel warned after one particularly insistent call. Someone might have connected the dots between Vivian Capital and Phoenix Holdings. "Let them speculate," I replied, a cold certainty in my voice. "We're too close to completion to change course now." Finally, we reached terms that satisfied both parties' requirements, or, more accurately, terms that Westbrook had no choice but to accept given their dire financial situation. The agreement protected jobs for rank-and-file employees while removing current executive management. The Westbrook family would receive fair compensation for their shares, but would have no ongoing role in company operations. All that remained was the final meeting to sign the acquisition documents. And the moment my family would discover exactly who had purchased their company. "Are you ready for this?" Sophia Martinez asked when I called her the night before the meeting. My mentor had watched Vivian Capital's growth with pride, offering occasional guidance but always respecting my independence. "I've been preparing for 3 years," I answered, a quiet intensity in my voice. "Though probably not in the way they think." "Just remember," Sophia advised, "tomorrow isn't about the past. It's about the future you're building. Don't let old wounds distract you from the business at hand." I promised I wouldn't, though we both knew the meeting would inevitably be emotional. After hanging up, I stood at my penthouse window, looking out at the glittering city lights. Tomorrow would bring the culmination of a journey that had begun with betrayal, yes, but had forced me to become stronger, smarter, and more resilient than I might have been otherwise. Whatever happened in that boardroom, I would face it not as the daughter who had been betrayed, but as the CEO who had built something remarkable through her own efforts. The morning of the final acquisition meeting dawned clear and bright, sunlight streaming through the floor-to-ceiling windows of my penthouse. I had been awake since 4 a.m., reviewing documents and mentally preparing for the confrontation to come. My morning routine took on an almost ceremonial quality. Selecting a perfectly tailored charcoal suit, applying makeup with precision, arranging my hair in a sleek chignon. Each action was deliberate, armor being assembled piece by piece. As I fastened my grandmother's pearl earrings, the only inheritance from her that my parents couldn't take away, memories cascaded through my mind. The 16-year-old girl beaming as Grandmother Vivian explained the trust fund and its purpose. The devastated 30-year-old learning that her family had betrayed that trust. The determined woman who had built something from nothing in the years since. "They wanted to teach me humility," I murmured to my reflection, my voice flat, almost an exhalation. "Instead, they taught me self-reliance." My phone buzzed with a text from James, final acquisition documents reviewed and approved by legal. All systems go. Another notification appeared. An Instagram alert I'd set for Maxwell's account. His latest post showed him standing beside a new sports car with the caption, "Last ride in the Lamborghini before big corporate meeting #blessed #entrepreneur_life." The irony was almost too perfect. While the company foundered, he was still playing the role of successful executive. I wondered if he had any idea what awaited him in today's meeting. During the car ride to the office, I scrolled through old emails from my parents. After I cut contact 3 years ago, they had sent periodic messages, first demanding, then cajoling, finally pleading for reconciliation. Their most recent attempt had come just last week. "Andrea, please respond. We're facing difficult times with the company. Your father is stressed beyond his limits. Maxwell is doing his best, but we could use your financial expertise. Family needs to stand together in challenging times. Love, Mom." No acknowledgement of what they had done. Just an expectation that I would come running when they needed me, despite having discarded me when I no longer served their narrative. The Vivian Capital offices were already buzzing with activity when I arrived. Dominic approached me immediately, tablet in hand. "They're here already," he reported. "Arrived 20 minutes early. I've put them in the Maple conference room with coffee and pastries." "They're early because they're nervous," I noted, a slight edge to my voice. "What's your read on them?" Dominic, with his remarkable talent for assessing people, had been my eyes and ears during preliminary meetings with Westbrook representatives. "Your father looks ill," Dominic observed, his tone low. "Pale, shaky hands. Your mother is maintaining appearances, but keeps checking her makeup, a nervous habit. Maxwell is alternating between checking his phone and pacing. None of them are speaking much to each other." "Security feed?" I asked. Dominic nodded and handed me his tablet. The high-definition security camera showed the conference room where my family waited. My father, Richard, looked significantly older than when I'd last seen him, his confident posture replaced by a slight stoop. My mother, Eleanor, sat rigidly, her social smile nowhere in evidence. Maxwell kept adjusting his tie, clearly uncomfortable in formal business attire. As I watched, my mother leaned toward my father and whispered something. Though there was no audio, her agitation was clear from her gestures. What if it's someone who knows about the trust fund situation? I could almost hear her saying, "What if they use it against us?" My father shook his head dismissively, but his expression betrayed a flicker of uncertainty. Maxwell checked his watch for the third time in as many minutes. "The whole team is ready when you are," Dominic said, reclaiming his tablet. "James has the financial presentations prepared. Rachel has the final documents organized for signatures. And security? 2 plainclothes officers in the reception area, as requested. Just a precaution." Dominic hesitated. "Andrea, are you sure you want to do this alone? I could accompany you for the initial meeting." I appreciated his concern, but shook my head. "This is something I need to do myself. Have the team ready to join us 30 minutes in, after the initial introductions." In my office, I took a moment to center myself. On my desk sat a photo of my grandmother, Vivian, the only personal item I displayed at work. "I wish you could see this," I told her image, a soft smile touching my lips. "Not the revenge part. You were always above that. But the business I've built, the people I've helped succeed. I think you'd be proud." My desk phone buzzed. "Miss Westbrook, your 10 a.m. is waiting in the Maple conference room," my assistant's voice announced. "Thank you, Clara. Please inform Mr. Taylor and the team to join us at 10:30. Before leaving my office, I received a final text from Sophia. "Remember who you are today, not who they tried to make you." The walk to the conference room felt both endless and too brief. Each step took me closer to a confrontation 3 years in the making. My heels clicked rhythmically on the polished floor, keeping time with my heartbeat. Outside the conference room, I paused. Through the frosted glass, I could see the silhouettes of my family, still waiting to meet the mysterious Miss Andrea, who held their company's fate in her hands. Dominic appeared at my side one last time. "Everything is in place," he assured me, his voice quiet, steady. "Whatever happens in there, you've already won." I nodded, drawing strength from his unwavering confidence in me. "It's time," I said, and reached for the door handle. I opened the door deliberately, striding into the room with measured steps. For 3 seconds, I counted them silently. No one recognized me. They saw only a confident executive in an impeccable suit, the presumed representative of Phoenix Holdings. My mother spoke first, her voice a little nervous. "We were expecting to meet with Miss Andrea." Her voice trailed off as recognition, then horror dawned in her eyes. "Andrea." My father half rose from his chair, his face draining of color. What is the meaning of this? Maxwell simply stared, his mouth slightly open, comprehension slowly replacing confusion. Please, everyone, remain seated, I said, my voice steady, professional, utterly devoid of emotion. I am Andrea Westbrook, CEO of Vivian Capital and Phoenix Holdings. I placed my portfolio on the table and sat at the head position, my rightful place. I believe we have an acquisition to finalize. The silence that followed was thick enough to cut with a knife. My mother recovered first, years of social training kicking in. Andrea, darling, why didn't you tell us you were behind this offer? We've been so worried about you. No contact for years, and now this surprise. Her tone was a sickening blend of forced concern and thinly veiled manipulation. This isn't a family reunion, Mother, I replied coolly, my eyes unwavering. This is a business meeting. Phoenix Holdings is acquiring Westbrook Manufacturing, according to the terms your representatives have already agreed to. My father found his voice, anger finally overriding his shock. This is outrageous. You've manipulated this entire process. No judge would uphold an agreement made under these circumstances. Rachel, our legal counsel, had anticipated this exact reaction. I removed a document from my portfolio and slid it across the table. This legal opinion from Judge Carlton Morrison disagrees. As you can see, he confirms that all negotiations have been conducted in good faith, with full disclosure of material facts about the company's condition. The fact that you didn't know my identity doesn't invalidate the agreement. You've orchestrated this whole thing for revenge. Maxwell accused, his face flushing crimson. This isn't business. It's personal. I maintained my composure, though his hypocrisy was breathtaking. On the contrary, Maxwell. This acquisition makes perfect business sense. Westbrook Manufacturing has valuable assets being squandered by incompetent management. Phoenix Holdings specializes in turning around such situations. I opened my laptop and turned it to face them. Let's review exactly what we're acquiring, shall we? The presentation I had prepared was devastating in its clinical precision. Slide after slide documented Westbrook's shocking decline under Maxwell's leadership, plummeting quality metrics, lost contracts, ballooning executive expenses, and steadily declining employee morale. Stop this, my mother interrupted, her carefully maintained facade finally cracking. We get the point. Mistakes were made. Mistakes? I echoed, my voice chillingly calm. Is that what you call it? When safety violations increased 76% under Maxwell's management? When pension funds were borrowed against to finance executive bonuses? When loyal employees who built this company were laid off while leadership purchased luxury vehicles? My father, ever the pragmatist, changed tactics. Andrea, clearly you've built something impressive. We underestimated you, and that was wrong. But this is still a family business. Surely, we can come to an arrangement that keeps Westbrook under family control. The time for family arrangements passed 3 years ago, I replied evenly, my gaze locked on his. But if you're concerned about the company's future, let me assure you that our restructuring plan preserves jobs for rank-and-file employees and maintains the Westbrook name on the products. Maxwell had been unusually quiet, studying my presentation with growing discomfort. When he finally spoke, his voice lacked its usual bravado. The trust fund money. You think I wasted it all, didn't you? Did you? I asked simply, meeting his gaze. He looked down at his hands, a sigh escaping him. Most of it. The club failed before it even opened. I tried to recover with some investments, but they didn't pan out. The rest went to keeping up appearances, making everyone think I was succeeding. My mother reached for his hand sympathetically. Maxwell was under tremendous pressure to perform. And yet you placed that burden on him after taking away my opportunity, I noted, the bitterness clear in my tone. You set him up to fail by giving him something he hadn't earned and wasn't prepared to manage. My father, ever protective of Maxwell, bristled. We made the decision we thought was best at the time. Maxwell had tangible needs. You were already successful. I was building towards something specific, I corrected him, my voice firm. The trust fund wasn't about need. It was about opportunity. Grandmother established it for my education and business ventures because she saw my potential. You had no right to redirect it based on your perceptions of who deserved it more. Your grandmother couldn't have foreseen the family's circumstances, my mother argued, trying to grasp at straws. She would have wanted the money to help Maxwell. Don't, I said sharply, slamming my hand lightly on the table, the sudden noise making them jump. Don't presume to speak for her. She was explicit about her intentions, and you deliberately subverted them. An uncomfortable silence fell. Maxwell broke it unexpectedly, his voice quiet, almost an admission to himself. She's right, he said, not looking at our parents. Grandmother always said the trust was for Andrea's business ventures. She told me once that I'd have plenty of opportunities through the family company, but Andrea would need to make her own way. He glanced up at me, a flicker of something resembling remorse in his eyes. I didn't fight hard enough against taking your money. I convinced myself I deserved it more. His admission caught me completely off guard. It was perhaps the first time Maxwell had ever truly acknowledged his role in our family dynamic. My father, seeing the conversation slipping away from family sentiment and back to stark business, tried another approach. What exactly do you want, Andrea? If this is about the trust fund, we can discuss repayment terms. This isn't about repayment, I stated, the finality in my voice undeniable. This is about business. Phoenix Holdings is acquiring Westbrook Manufacturing because it's a sound investment opportunity when properly managed. I signaled to Clara, who opened the door to admit James, Rachel, and the rest of my executive team. Now, shall we proceed with the final terms? The remaining hour was strictly business. James presented our restructuring plan. Rachel reviewed the legal documents requiring signatures. My team answered technical questions about transition procedures and timelines. Through it all, I maintained professional detachment, though beneath the surface, emotions churned. This was the culmination of years of work, yes, but also the final, painful chapter of a twisted family history. As the meeting concluded and my team gathered the signed documents, I noticed my mother blinking back tears. For a moment, I glimpsed the frightened woman behind the polished exterior, someone facing the consequences of her actions, perhaps for the very first time. What happens to us now? She asked quietly, her voice thin. The terms are clear, I replied, closing my portfolio deliberately before answering. You and father receive fair compensation for your shares. Maxwell's position is eliminated with standard severance. The company continues under new management. I meant, as a family, she clarified, her voice barely a whisper. I looked at them, taking a deep breath. That depends on whether you're finally ready to see me as I am, not as who you wanted me to be. With that, I stood and extended my hand formally to my father. The acquisition team will be in touch regarding next steps. Thank you for your cooperation today. As they gathered their belongings to leave, Maxwell paused beside me. For what it's worth, he said softly, avoiding my eyes. You proved them wrong about everything. I nodded acknowledgement, but offered nothing more. The time for family dynamics, for rehashing old hurts, was past. We had become what they had made us. Maxwell, the entitled son who had never learned to stand on his own. Me, the daughter who had been forced to build herself from scratch. The difference was, only one of us had succeeded. The conference room emptied as my executive team filed out with the signed acquisition documents, leaving me alone with my family for the first time in 3 years. The formal business concluded, we stood in awkward silence, the weight of both past and future hanging heavy between us. My father was the first to speak. I need to know, he said, his voice uncharacteristically subdued. Was this all about revenge? I considered the question carefully before answering. No, I said, meeting his gaze. It's about business, legacy, and setting things right. Not just for me, but for all the employees whose livelihoods were at stake. We never meant to hurt you, Andrea, my mother said, reaching toward me, but stopping short of actual contact, sensing the invisible barrier between us. We thought we were making the right decision for everyone. That's the problem, I replied, my voice gentle but firm. You made decisions about my life, my future, my inheritance without considering what I wanted or needed. You decided Maxwell deserved my trust fund more than I did, without any regard for grandmother's wishes or my plans. We were wrong, my father admitted, the words clearly difficult for him. About the trust fund. About your capabilities. About so many things. I was so focused on protecting Maxwell that I never saw how much I was hurting you. Maxwell, standing slightly apart, added, I should have refused the money. Deep down, I knew it wasn't right. But I was desperate to prove myself, to live up to Dad's expectations. And how did that work out? I asked, not unkindly. He shook his head ruefully. I failed. Spectacularly. Everything I touched fell apart, including the company. Because you're trying to be something you're not, I observed, a profound realization in my own voice. Just as I was always trying to be what our parents wanted, instead of who I actually am. My mother dabbed at her eyes with a tissue. Can you ever forgive us? The question hung in the air between us. 3 years ago, I would have said no, without hesitation. Now, with the perspective of success and the quiet confidence it had brought, I could see my parents more clearly, not as the infallible authorities of my childhood, but as flawed individuals who had made serious mistakes. Forgiveness is possible, I said finally, my voice softened. But trust has to be earned back. You broke something fundamental between us, and it can't be repaired with just an apology. What can we do? My father asked, truly sounding lost. Accept the consequences of your actions. Respect the boundaries I set. And perhaps most importantly, see me for who I actually am, not who you wanted me to be. They nodded solemnly, and for perhaps the first time, I felt they were truly listening to me. After my family left, I scheduled individual meetings with them over the coming weeks. My conversation with Maxwell was surprisingly productive. Without our parents' influence, he spoke candidly about his struggles and failures. I never wanted to run the company, he confessed. I wanted to work in music production, but Dad made it clear that wasn't an option for a Westbrook. What will you do now? I asked. Start over. Properly this time. No safety nets, no family name to trade on. He hesitated. I may need some advice along the way. I'm not giving you money, I clarified immediately. He laughed. A genuine, light sound I hadn't heard from him in years. No, I meant actual advice. About building something real. You seem to know how to do that. The implementation of our restructuring plan for Westbrook Manufacturing began immediately. I appointed James Taylor as interim CEO to oversee the transition, with a clear mandate to preserve jobs while improving efficiency and quality control. 2 weeks after the acquisition, I visited the factory floor myself. The employees had been informed about the change in ownership, but were understandably anxious about what it meant for their futures. I stood before them, not as Richard Westbrook's daughter, but as the CEO of the company that now controlled their livelihoods. I know many of you have worked here for decades, I began, my voice carrying clearly through the vast space. You've built this company with your skill and dedication, often despite challenges from management. I want you to know that Westbrook's future depends on your expertise, and our restructuring plan puts your job security as a priority. An older worker raised his hand. With respect, Miss Westbrook, we've heard promises before. Maxwell told us our jobs were secure right before laying off 20% of the floor staff. A fair concern, I acknowledged, looking him directly in the eye. Which is why I'm not asking you to take my word for it. The detailed restructuring plan is available for all employees to review. It includes modernization of equipment, skills training programs, and a profit-sharing structure that wasn't possible under previous management. By the end of the meeting, the tension had noticeably eased. These were practical people who responded to straightforward communication and concrete plans, something they had been deprived of under Maxwell's disastrous leadership. As I was leaving, an elderly craftsman approached me. You remind me of your grandmother, he said, his eyes kind. She used to visit the floor regularly when your grandfather was running things. Always asked good questions. Always remembered our names. The comparison to Vivian meant more to me than he could possibly know. Thank you, I said sincerely. That's the highest compliment you could give me. In the months that followed, I maintained limited contact with my parents. Our relationship remained formal but cordial, like business associates with a complicated history rather than family. My father, after his initial anger subsided, grudgingly acknowledged the improvements we were making to the company he had built. The quality metrics are better than they've been in 5 years, he admitted during one of our quarterly update meetings. You've managed to cut costs while increasing worker satisfaction. I wouldn't have thought that possible. It's about priorities, I explained, meeting his gaze directly. When executives aren't draining resources on personal expenses, there's more available for what actually matters. The rebirth of Westbrook Manufacturing under Vivian Capital's guidance became something of a case study in ethical business turnaround. Industry publications noted the impressive increase in quality, the preservation of jobs, and the return to profitability achieved without the usual slash-and-burn tactics of corporate raiders. 6 months after the acquisition, I had dinner with Margaret Foster, my grandmother's oldest friend and confidant. Now in her 80s, Margaret remained sharp-minded and direct. Vivian would be proud of you, she told me over dessert. Not just for the business success, though that's impressive enough. She'd be proud of how you handled the trust fund situation. By buying the family company? I asked with a small, wry smile. Margaret chuckled, her eyes sparkling. By refusing to be defined by what was taken from you. Vivian always said, true character shows not when things go well, but when they don't. You proved your character by building something new instead of just fighting over what was lost. Her words helped me understand something I had been struggling to articulate, even to myself. The acquisition of Westbrook Manufacturing hadn't been primarily about revenge, or even reclaiming what was rightfully mine. It had been about honoring my grandmother's legacy by becoming the kind of businesswoman she had seen in me from the very beginning. Someone who could create value and opportunity, who could see potential where others saw only problems. Under my guidance, Westbrook returned to the founding principles that had made it successful initially: quality craftsmanship, fair treatment of workers, and innovation in manufacturing processes. We maintained the Westbrook name on products, not for family sentiment, but because it still represented quality to longtime customers. My relationship with my parents continued to evolve slowly. After a year, we managed occasional family dinners that, while not entirely comfortable, were at least civil. Maxwell, somewhat to my surprise, found his footing working for a music production company, a career path our parents had discouraged, but that suited his actual talents and passions. "Are you happy?" my mother asked during one of these dinners, studying me with a newfound attentiveness I hadn't seen before. The question gave me pause. For so long, my entire focus had been on proving myself, on building security, on validating my worth through achievement. Happiness had seemed almost irrelevant to the journey. "I'm fulfilled," I answered thoughtfully, a genuine smile on my face. "I've built something meaningful that provides for others. I make decisions based on my own values, not anyone else's expectations. So yes, I think that's happiness, though perhaps not in the conventional sense." As for the trust fund that had started it all, the $3 million that my parents had redirected to Maxwell, I came to see its loss as paradoxically valuable. Had I received it as planned, my path might have been easier, yes, but perhaps less extraordinary. Being forced to build from nothing had made me more innovative, more resilient, and ultimately, more successful than I might otherwise have been. The irony wasn't lost on me. In trying to humble me by taking away my inheritance, my parents had inadvertently set me on a path to greater achievement than any of us had imagined possible. The trust fund would have given me $3 million. Losing it had ultimately led me to build a company worth hundreds of millions. More importantly, it had taught me the most valuable lesson of all, that true worth comes not from what you're given, but from what you create. Not from others' validation, but from your own determination to succeed on your own terms. Standing in my office overlooking the city, watching the lights come on as dusk settled over the skyline, I felt a profound sense of peace. The journey from betrayed daughter to successful CEO had been painful and challenging, but it had shaped me into someone stronger and wiser than I would have been otherwise. Sometimes, the greatest gift is being forced to discover just how capable you truly are, even when, especially when, those who should believe in you the most are the ones who doubt you. Looks directly at the camera, a warm, inviting expression. Have you ever had someone underestimate you, only for you to prove them wrong in a spectacular way? Or have you experienced a setback that ultimately led to greater success than you could have imagined? I genuinely love to hear your stories. Share them in the comments below, tell me how you turned adversity into triumph. And if this story resonated with you, please hit that like button and subscribe for more tales of resilience and success against the odds. Remember, sometimes losing what you thought you needed is the first step to finding what you're truly capable of achieving. Thank you for joining me on this journey, and may your own path be filled with the strength to overcome whatever challenges come your way.